All right, friends, this week we are in chapter 8 and the beginning of chapter 9 of Matthew. And you have to forgive my voice this week. These allergies are wearing me out. So, what are we doing here in chapter 8 and the beginning of chapter 9? So, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what's going on here. We're then going to dive into the very beginning of chapter 8. And I want to leave us today with a prayer that I pray that I think will be helpful to you also. Okay, so 8 and 9, these two chapters together, what's going on here? Well, these are coming on the heels of the Sermon on the Mount, and really what they are is they are Jesus beginning to live into what it is that he taught in 5 through 7. Remember, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says that what it means to be one who builds the house on the rock and not the sand is to be one who hears Jesus' words and does them. Jesus is not just someone who teaches and doesn't do what he's teaching. He's not a hypocrite where, like, the Sermon on the Mount is his stage and he's just teaching some things and then not doing them himself. No. Just like he says to us, hear them and do them. Just like he says to us, don't say one thing and live a different way. 5 through 7 is his brilliant teaching on how to live. And then in 8 and 9, we see him actually living this way. And if you think about it, I mean, this is the first time that we're really beginning to see Jesus in kind of his ordinary life. Chapters 1 and 2 were just about him as a baby and then things that happened when he was a kid. 3 and 4, there's kind of the setup. We meet him as an adult, but it's all setting the stage for what's to come, really. 5 through 7 is the teaching. Now we get into his life, his ministry, just kind of walking around the region that he's in. What's his life going to look like? Is it going to reflect his teachings? What do we learn from the way that he lives? Just the first four verses today of chapter 8. When he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him. So he steps down from the mountain, meaning he's done with the Sermon on the Mount, and crowds follow him. And behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him. So leprosy is a skin disease. It actually probably was one term that was used to describe multiple different diseases. And it was a disease that if you had it, or one of these diseases, you were ostracized from the community. It was believed to be contagious, and probably some forms of it were. But even more than that, it was also considered to be a mark of spiritual impurity, uncleanliness. So when you had leprosy, you were separated from the community. Now, there were other things that when you had certain conditions, you were separated from the community. But those were conditions that would typically come and go. There were certain times when you would be considered unclean or impure after you touched a dead body. There's a variety of things in the Old Testament that would make you impure. Leprosy was particularly bad because as long as you had that skin condition, you were perpetually unclean. So who knows how long this man has had leprosy? But however long it has been, and it could have been for years, for decades, he has not only dealt with that condition, but he's also been ostracized from the community. So he comes into the crowds. I mean, even that alone is an extreme act of faith. That would have been a taboo. He comes into the crowds, kneels before Jesus and says, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. If you will, like if it's in your will, you can. He knows that he can be made clean. When he's talking about clean, it's again about being ceremonially, spiritually clean. But in order to be made clean, he has to also be healed of the leprosy. I know that you can. Do you will? Do you want to? And it's a question that he probably genuinely means. Because again, he has been on the outskirts of society for a long time. I know you can't do this, Jesus. Will you? Jesus stretched out his hand and he touched him and he said, I will I want this. Be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. No more leprosy. So he's now been physically healed. But then check this out. Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone. Don't go around telling people about this right now. Here's what you need to do. But go, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a proof to them. Meaning you have been physically healed, cleansed. But I know that you want to get back into society. And in order to do that, you know what you got to do. Go speak to the priest. Show them yourself. Show them that you have been made clean, that you no longer have this skin condition. And they'll go through the rituals for you to be able to come back into society. What Jesus is doing for this man is not just taking away the physical ailment, but he's also doing something that brings him back into society. Think about how this ties in with the Sermon on the Mount. Do you remember way back, whatever it was, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we talked about the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount? And what is it? It's the Beatitudes. The blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. And how he begins his teaching talking about how there's a group of people that nobody thinks is like worthy of being a part of what the Messiah would do. They're on the fringes of society. And Jesus says to them, what I talked about this in the Bible study and in Cornerstone, he says to them, you too are in. And how does he begin his ministry post the sermon? In the same way, by looking at this leper and saying to him, you too are in. Physically healing him and welcoming him back into society. He's practicing what he just preached. As we get into 8 and 9, what we're going to see is that there's a lot of miraculous healing. In fact, about over half of the healings that take place in Matthew take place in these 2 chapters. You'll see a lot of it. I think there are 11 healings in these 2 chapters. And it's probably going to leave you with some questions. We'll talk about this more later on in Matthew also, but to go ahead and touch on it now. Here's one thing that people often say, why does this not happen today? Well, I actually believe this happens today. I believe that people are healed today. You know, somebody one time, she had something going on with her leg, and we were praying, that it would be nothing, that it would be benign. And one of her friends said to her before she went in for the biopsy, look, if this comes back as benign, don't be so sure that it was always benign. We pray that it won't be anything or that it'll be healed. And then when we find out that it's benign, we say, oh, I guess we didn't have anything to worry about. I don't know. And when I worked as an intern for the summer in Children's Medical Center, on 2 occasions I saw things happen that doctors could not explain. On one occasion, the doctor said, with this family, your job is to prepare them to lose their daughter. Their daughter will not make it. 6 weeks later, they were carrying their daughter out of there. On another occasion, there was a girl who had sustained some significant head injuries. And they said she'll never be the way that she was before. She'll always have significant injuries associated with this. 6 weeks later, when I left, she had been discharged. Before that, no, she hadn't been discharged. She was down on a step-down unit, perfectly fine, just preparing to enter back into normal life. I don't understand these things, because I've also spent plenty of time praying for people who didn't receive healing, who did not receive the healing that we so desperately prayed for. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But I think the prayer that this leper prays is a good one. If you will, you can. And what I pray a lot of times is, God, I know that you can, and I pray that you will. At the end of the day, I trust you. I know that you can. But I pray that you will. And one of the things that I've certainly observed is that very, very faithful people have prayed very, very faithfully, and we haven't seen healing. And then there are other occasions when you didn't have a whole crowd of people praying, but you had some people, and there was. Remember, we talked about this last week. God is not a vending machine. It's not that if you push the right buttons, that the right things come out. And that if things are coming out that you don't want, it means that you were pushing the wrong button. It's not that simple. I wish that it was. But what I am left with today, after this and after reading 8-9, what I am left with is the conviction that God is still doing amazing things in this world. And that what I want to lean into even more in my life is praying big, bold prayers. If you will, I know that you can. I know that you can, so I pray that you will. And trusting God with the results, but leaning in prayer. I'm going to be curious as we read this week how it is that God's challenging you. That's one of the ways that God's challenging me. So God bless you, friends. Keep up the reading, and I'll see you later this week.